what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast presented to you by Texas Beat. I'm Connor O'Gara. Will, you are back, but Jimbo Fisher is not.
Correct. Here I am.
My God. Jimbo Fisher, as Billy Lucci first reported for Texags, is out at Texas A&M. Just a stunning Sunday morning news drop, which words I don't usually say. Stunning on every possible level, because obviously the buyout that I feel like we've been talking about forever, it's going to be, everybody's reporting somewhere between like $75 and $77 million. We'll kind of wait and see what it all is. When you get to that point, who really cares? Difference between $1 and $2 million. But Jimbo is out after A&M, ironically enough, has its best game against SEC competition since the 7 overtime game against LSU.
Man.
Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to go there. Had to humble you a little bit. But one of those things that, look, I pride myself on not predicting the future, but feeling like, okay, we have a good sense of what's going on in this conference. And to say that I woke up on Sunday morning and expected to be whipping up a batch of waffles for the family and expected to be getting a message from my editor, Chris Wright, shout out Chris Wright, hey, Billy Lucci reporting that Jimbo Fisher's fired. I can't say that I saw that one coming and can't say that I expected to talk about it here today. But here's the good news for us. Will, we didn't get cold takes, and that never happens. So raise a glass to us. But my God, we have a lot to dig into. There's so much to want to break down. When I texted you that, the report from Billy, what was your initial thought?
It's about to get real interesting with recruiting. I think A&M, one thing that they've always done, well, in the post-Johnny era, is recruit really well. And I feel like they have a lot of guys that are kind of, and I think so much goes into it. Like we were joking off air about this is the most A&M firing ever, because apparently like the Board of Regents or whatever met on Thursday, decided he was going to get fired. He coached, like you said, one of the best games front to back of his career at A&M, but he was already fired at that point. It didn't matter. It was kind of like Coach O. And so, yeah, I mean, now you kind of just look into the ether and think, all these recruits were kind of lukewarm anyway. And that's what I was going to say is, we never know the real vibe inside of a program. I think that was one thing that was starting to show some smoke, is that so many guys have started decommitting from A&M. So many guys started taking visits when they were committed. So it feels like the people inside the program knew something was happening. But yeah, it's a wild west when a team like that just completely loses leadership, because some players got to go somewhere.
The shockwaves will be sent throughout college football. This will have an impact on so many different teams, in part because of what it means for current coaches that are going to get a raise as a result of this to not go to A&M. We're going to get to some of the candidates and all of that as well. But we need to put some perspective on the Fisher era and what it was, because he finishes now 45-25 at A&M. He has a winning percentage that's worse than Kevin Sumlin. He would have needed to go 6-1 to match the 6 years, ironically enough, that Kevin Sumlin got at Texas A&M. So all those side-by-side comparisons down to the day that Jimbo Fisher was fired, they played. Only 2 top 25 finishes. That is, to me, that is such a stunning thing to process. And look, maybe this A&M team, if they end up going 8-4 or they win a bowl game or something, they would have to beat LSU to get to 8-4. But they do all those things, and maybe they can still finish in the top 25. So I don't know, take that for what it is. But in the last 6 seasons, A&M has as many top 25 finishes as Northwestern. Well, that is that right there, for a man that A&M committed $117 million to. $117 million. Think about that, because it's not just the $75 million that was committed to him. It's, you added these 3 years, or you already had those 3 years banked with him on that contract. And then you had the 10-year, $95 million contract, those things associated. This has to go down as one of the biggest coaching failures in American sports history, despite the fact that A&M obviously had the 2020 season in which you had the best AP poll finish since 1939. But you're still sitting there without a West title, and we need to lay to rest 2 things, 2 iconic things, some would say, that will forever be associated with the Jimbo Fisher era in College Station. You know what one of them is? One of them is the future national championship plaque that Jimbo Fisher was awarded before he ever coached a game, wherein it said 20 and then it left it blank at the end of it. So credit to A&M for not putting like, just the 2 and thinking, okay, well, got to give him the rest of the century. Okay, he'll get there. Yeah, maybe it'll be like 21-34, but he'll get there. That I would love to know where that currently is. Chris Vanini just did a great story in The Athletic on the civil conflict trophy and the whereabouts of that. So I feel like if that can be tracked down, so can this. Somebody please make that happen.
This day has a little bit of everything for me. We got a civil conflict reference in the chat. Let's go. Yeah, I mean, here's the question. Do you think he immediately threw it away, or do you think he is going to bring it to a ranch and like ceremoniously burn it in a big bonfire while wearing like a cowboy hat?
Well, that's the thing, is that I don't think this is the type of thing that makes the cut when one is emptying out one's office and is putting stuff in the box. I don't know how that works with Jimbo. And if he truly has somebody that does that, how that process, you go about that when you are as filthy rich as he is. You can just hang out in one of your ranches and have somebody else do it, I guess. But it's somewhere. Look, I'd like to think it's still in solid form. I'm going to picture that the fake plaque is still in solid form. You know what else is in solid form that I might have to set a match to? Well, the Iowa notepad.
No.
I know. For the YouTube audience, you can see exactly what I'm holding up. For the listen only audience, just take my words and know that this isn't goodbye. It's see you later. It's see you later to the Iowa notepad that chronicled the Jimbo Fisher buyout numbers and was always at the ready for me. It was a safety blanket. It was a source of entertainment. It kept me sane during these moments in which I thought to myself, no, I can't bang the drum for an underachieving coach who's on this ridiculously guaranteed salary. I can't bang the drum for him to be fired. Pull me out of my misery, Iowa notebook, and tell me that this can't happen. And don't you know it will? It happened. And so here I sit with this notepad in hand. And I just feel like, you know what? This piece of paper, it had more years left. It could have gotten to that 2026 in which we would have been like, oh, hey, Jimbo's buyout. It's down. It's below $50 million.
That thing is about 8 to 10 lines on it right now. Like, were you doing math each time something happened?
Well, I did not mess around with this. Look, I can't just set it ablaze. We can't do that. That's not fair. That wouldn't be doing this right. But it's not going to be shown for a while. And if anything, you know what? It cold takes myself because I was dead wrong about this. When Bruce Feldman came out with his report in The Athletic about a month ago about coaches on the hot seat saying that Jimbo Fisher was on that and that A&M was going to find a way to pay this money if they felt it was necessary, I kind of scoffed at that. And I said, I'll believe it when I see it, because the richest buyout ever paid, Gus Malzahn, $21.5 million, just in case you forgot.
Oh my gosh.
This is 3.5 times that. We were supposed to get a $30 million buyout first. All right. We weren't just supposed to go from $21.5 million to $76 million, just like that. That is why I've been banging this drum so unbelievably hard, and why this Iowa notepad has been my savior. This has been one of the most unprecedented tenures from start to finish that we have ever seen, not just in the SEC, not just in college football, but in sports. This is baffling, Will. This is truly baffling. And I found myself saying, is there one specific thing that we could point to, that we could say, if Jimbo does this, if he goes this direction, that he hits this fork in the road instead of that fork in the road, this thing goes in a totally different direction? Because you could look back and say, well, did he just stop recruiting? Because that was the knock at Florida State, and all these Florida State fans who are probably having themselves a nice cold glass of beer on this Sunday morning, thinking about Mike Norvell and thinking about how this Jimbo Fisher tenure went. They were all saying he stopped recruiting at Florida State. Okay. He didn't stop doing that. All of his full cycle classes at A&M were top 10 classes. Last 2 years, he was top 4 in the country in talent composite rankings. They signed 14 5-star recruits during his time there.
14. Goodness, man.
I mean, think about that. Like, this wasn't a situation like that where all of a sudden, he he just gave up. He got frustrated with the resources around him. It was the exact opposite. He had all the resources he could possibly want. He could poach any coordinator. He could poach any recruit. He could do whatever. And still, this is the result of a
Still,
coach.
he ended up with DJ Durkin and Bobby Petrino and getting fired.
Bobby Petrino has improved the offense by 12 points per game, Will.
Oh, yeah. Crazy? That actually was a great – he should have probably done that sooner. Like, when you talk about where it kind of went wrong, if he had done that beginning of last year and just been like, hey, Bobby, I know you're not up to anything, brother. Get over here. We'll pay a couple milli. Yeah.
That's perfectly fair. 9 consecutive road losses to end his tenure, though.
Wow.
He, in the last 2 seasons, did not win a true road game. I mean, that is – for somebody making that kind of money to do that in year 5 and year 6, Jimbo Fisher just forget how to coach? Did he just forget how to coach? Did he forget that this conference, the margin for error is so unbelievably slim? And did he have too much bravado thinking that because of his time at Florida State, wherein he won a national championship, he coached a Heisman Trophy winner, he took over one of the all-time greats that this sport has ever seen in Bobby Bowden, and he had learned from Nick Saban, and he had done all these things. Stubbornness is probably the main culprit of why this didn't work out and why we're sitting here having this conversation. It has to be. But I don't know that you can necessarily say you shouldn't sign up for that. You should sign up for what A&M signed up for. The money is what is absurd, but you sign up every single time you can poach a national championship winning coach who can bring in elite talent. That is the name of the game in this day and age. And there are a lot of people saying, I'd take that risk 100 times out of 100. But obviously, when the money that's associated with it is what it is, we're left scratching our heads going, how in the world are you going to bounce back from this? And that's the question I think all of us are asking.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting, right? Because, okay, and we never want to like really feel, I've talked about this before, it's hard to feel sorry for A&M because they have so much money. So like they'll probably be fine. Like they're not worried about like, this is kind of their worst case, and it's still a guy who is always kind of like in the middle of the pack. It wasn't like an Arkansas situation. But yeah, I will say this, like, and this is the whole like not make excuses, but when they had Kellen Mond, this was a team that was at least we knew what they were. They were pretty much the same team, pretty close every year they had Kellen Mond. The defense was a little bit better or worse, right? But as soon as he left and they had this weird revolving door at quarterbacks, it all just completely fell off a cliff. And
can I address that real quick? Because that's a great point. Because there are a lot of people that will look at the last 3 years, and we'll get to the A&M game against Mississippi State. Jalen Henderson, your third different starting quarterback. You've had some bad injury luck the last couple of years. I totally get that. You're also not supposed to have a 3-year starter who never misses a start, who is mobile like Kellen Mond is when you're playing that style of system. So I think that's like, if you're saying, well, Jimbo Fisher just had bad injury luck and whatever, like the guy couldn't make it work. He also had great injury luck those first 3 years and got to establish his offense with the player that Kellen Mond was.
100%. Yeah, I think that's the correct way to address it. It's like, it always regresses to the mean, right? If you have a guy who's super healthy for 3 years and you have a perfect quarterback room and you're still making these weird offensive miscues and you still don't have a top, 2 or 3 offense in the SEC with this great quarterback or at least a solid plus quarterback, then when you have a revolving door, it's like, well, what are we going to do here? Because it's kind of like, why we worry about Jayden Daniels leaving because all these crazy third down plays, all these things, it's like, how good is the offense really? And it's like, same deal here. He waited too long to bring in a Petrino, and then he had another injury. And it's like, we'll never get to know, what this would have been with Wigman and Petrino, but that's because he didn't bring in Petrino soon enough. He would have, even if Max Johnson were playing last year with Petrino, he would have had more reps under the same system this year. So it's like, it's so hard to feel sorry for Jimbo Fisher, a guy who left one fan base hanging to come to another one, chase the money. I get it, but he didn't chase the winning. I never felt like there was a point. I mean, even in 2020, they had that blowout loss to Bama. It felt pretty clearly like they were not really they were not the best team in the SEC that year. So I don't know. I mean, I can't really pick out a moment, but it just kind of felt like this was inevitable after the last couple of years.
The sliding door, the most recent, the last sliding door, the last opportunity that he really could have changed things, because as you pointed out, this decision, according to Billy Lucci, was made Thursday. So it had nothing to do with the Mississippi State result. I don't think it had anything to do with even the Ole Miss result. I don't. I think this was, you don't make a decision like that based on that kind of a game. Like, with all due respect to Ole Miss and who A&M is, by the way, clinching bowl eligibility on Saturday night. I don't think you make that expensive of a decision, a potential $150 million decision, as Ross Dellinger was kind of breaking down. And if you look at the buyouts for this staff, what it's going to take to hire a new staff, that's not even getting into the NIL stuff too, with recruits and how much it's going to cost to either keep some of these guys on your roster, to go out and get new guys. Like, this is going to be historically expensive to be able to build up just to get to respectability. And that I think is something that you're like, all right, well, whatever. It was the only choice that A&M had to make. And if you're willing to make it, okay, that's fine. But you look at all these different things and you're like, man, so if they had been able to win that game against Bama this year, could this season have gone differently? Their offensive line still had too many issues for my liking. Still probably not consistent enough on the defensive end, though they do have the game records up front. But still probably wasn't going to be a team that was going to win the West. I don't think if they beat Bama, they are out of the woods and they win the West. Would it have changed the complexion of Fisher? Could it have bought him more time to maybe get to the end of the season? And maybe if we're talking about like 9-3, potentially get to a 10th win in a bowl game, could that have maybe given him another year? Yeah, it could have. I think it could have. But did it all of a sudden mean that Fisher was going to take off like a rocket ship and he was going to maximize this championship window that we had talked about with his historic 2022 class? No, I don't think that would have been the case. And I think A&M, I think it was Bruce Feldman who had the quote where it was like, what was another 8-4 season going to show? What were we really going to be? It's just delaying the inevitable. And the fact that Texas is coming to this conference next year and Oklahoma as well, there was, in my opinion, going to be a desire to show this, that you won the breakup and that Texas was coming back in town for Thanksgiving break. You had gone your separate ways when you decided to go to college. You wanted to show Texas. Hey, I didn't put on that freshman 15. I'm good. I'm doing well. I'm living my best life off at State U. I'm doing well. And instead, they are at a place where, once again, in a new era of a conference, they're having to find a new coach. Now, it worked out last time. And Kevin Sumlin, year one of the SEC, has this unbelievable season that nobody could have seen coming with Johnny Manziel. And it probably set expectations at a different level. But that to me is what A&M is aspiring to achieve, is to have more years like that, to where it doesn't feel like this one-off all the time. And by the end of Fisher's tenure, it's wild to think that 2020 was such a one-off. And it wasn't even a particularly enjoyable season because you didn't have these capacity crowds and you didn't know if you were going to play in a given week. I mean, goodness gracious, like that to me, if you're going to hang your hat on that as like, that's your best year, both as an individual or as a player, I keep thinking of like Zach Wilson, how that was his best year as an individual, and how it's like, oh, that kind of sucks. I wouldn't want to base everything on that, but that is really what this came down to. And
imagine basing your whole, I mean, hey, Bill Belichick did. I will say this too. These are two like kind of funnier notes on this, but as you talk about the 2020 season, it is kind of ironic like that A&M just made a bowl game, right? I hope we see a zombie Texas A&M bowl game like we've seen for so many, because those are so fun, where like there's like a couple of players left. But remember, they opted out of that 2020 bowl game because they were like getting ready for next year. They're like, you guys don't know what's coming. We got a couple of small COVID scare. We're going to err on the side of caution this time.
They didn't want Blake Bose to be their starting quarterback in a bowl game. They didn't want to have a walk-on quarterback who was out there. If you saw the Travis Brown tweet on Saturday night, wherein he was warming up wearing Max Johnson's jersey, his practice jersey, and everybody's like, what? Is like, are they doing some gamesmanship thing? And like A&M beat reporters couldn't even recognize this guy. And he could have been starting in this bowl game a couple of years ago had they actually played. But yeah, you're right. They haven't played in a bowl game in 3 years. They haven't played a bowl game since the end of that 2020 season because they didn't make one last year. So, I mean, you're playing one this year, but golly, it's been a long time since A&M has actually had a reason to feel good.
But yeah, and then exactly what you said about that 2020 class, it's like bringing that in the boat was such a big deal because it's like, look, we got him. It's over with. Da-da-da. Now with the transfer
2022
portal.
class, not 2020 class.
Oh, no, you're right. You're
Yeah.
100% right. That was the huge one where it was like, hey, look at the recruiting rankings. Everybody's pointing at that. Now in the modern era, it's like, okay, well, those guys are just free agents. You know, I mean,
Yep.
you got to whoever you bring in. And I don't even think it's really worth rushing your coaching search to save those guys, you know, because at the end of the day, you'd rather make a good coaching hire because players are going to come and go. But it's like, you know, you bring in your guy and he has to like re-recruit these guys. I would assume they at least give him a chance to do that. But maybe if they take 2 or 3 months, maybe they don't. So I don't know. It's going to be fascinating to see such a rich and talented program actually be struggling. You know, like I said, you're going to be fine if you're Texas A&M. If your worst case scenario is just paying another mid-plus head coach to go 8-4 for a couple of years and then fire him here, you're not going to be Arkansas. You're not going to fall all the way back into the 2-1 win situations. Like they wouldn't tolerate that, you know? So I think that's at least you can say that your administration values winning in this moment. So you can kind of be happy, honestly. It's like, well, we tried the big fish, didn't go like everyone thought. You said Gus Malzahn at 21 mil?
21.5 million. And if you recall, they didn't even have alignment on how they wanted to replace him. And that to me was like, wait a minute, you're going to pay all this money to a guy that's been there for 8 years. And Auburn wasn't even bad in 2020. They were what, 6-4, I think that year. And like they were fine. They weren't, it wasn't a disastrous Gus Malzahn season or anything like that. This wasn't 2015 or anything. And they still were not aligned on who they wanted to replace him. And there was the boosters who wanted Kevin Steele and there was that whole deal. And like, wait a minute. So like you're going to make this unprecedented move to have the defensive coordinator promoted. And I think A&M has more alignment than that. And that's the good news. If I'm an Aggie fan, is that I feel like this isn't going to be a move in which you just take the cheap way out because you feel like that's all you can do. To me,
there's no cheap way.
None of this is cheap.
Yeah.
None of this is cheap. It's just not. So let's talk about some candidates because there are a lot of people out there. Everybody's a candidate. If you're not a candidate,
I want to say this really quick. You asked me this the other day. I think that this proves A&M is Fansville.
You know,
I could now see all of this stuff happening.
Yeah, Mississippi State, I think, was the leader in the clubhouse. There was so much maroon in that game last night; it was hard to watch at times. I was just like, I need to take a step back here. Look, I think A&M might have won that title. I think you're right. I think A&M is Fansville. I do think that they have definitely earned that title. It's first play, guys. First play of the game. What are we doing? I love that line from Boss. Okay, candidates. Lane and Elko are where I'd start. And I know Ole Miss fans are sick and tired of hearing about it. You know what? It's going to be a yearly thing, okay? And it's not. We're not trying to disrespect your program, but there is going to be a market for Lane Kiffin. That is whether or not he takes it. Look, if he doesn't take opportunities like that, if he's not pursued, then okay, that's all well and good. There's going to continue to be a market for Lane Kiffin. Mike Elko is not quite out of the same Kevin Steele playbook that Auburn followed, but it would be ironic if it's the defensive coordinator who, look, you've seen what it's been like without him for the last 2 years and what he's doing at Duke. I give him all the credit of the world, former lad of the week, friend of the program, all those different things. Those would be the two where I'd start. Seeing Dan Lanning, Kalen DeBoer on the list of candidates, I want to say it was Pete Thamel who threw that out there. It's Rays season, so get ready. Your coach, Eli Drinkwitz, it's Rays season. It's coming. I'm sure James Franklin's going to somehow find a way to get a raise, despite the fact that he lives to serve Ohio State and Michigan. There are other candidates.
I'm imagining him as agent going to the AD after that, like, hey, you know, you don't want to lose. You don't want to get AD to hire this guy. It's like, buddy, they just fired that guy. Okay.
Yeah. James Franklin will not shoot down rumors that he will leave for Texas A&M, of course. The funniest hire is Mike Norvell. How does that work? Florida State would become the feeder program for Texas A&M, and Oregon was the feeder program for Florida State. So I don't know how that works in the chain of command or whatever, but that'd be a tough pill to swallow for Florida State as it approaches this new era potentially in the ACC. I guess probably won't happen, but still would be the funniest one, and one that, I mean, you had success pursuing the one last time, but then again on the A&M side, it's also like, well, do you really want to go down that after this colossal failure and bring in Mike Norvell and just do the exact same thing in some ways? Mike Norvell hasn't won a ring, doesn't appear to be as stubborn as Jimbo Fisher, but still, I don't know, kind of tempting fate by doing that. The other funniest hire that I know would never happen because he's on the wrong side of 70, but I'd still be like, oh, that's interesting, is Mac Brown.
He's innovating. You got to give Mac Brown credit. He scored in the 30s and 40s every night.
I mean, some are saying Gene Chizik got the stop that he needed to be able to close out Duke. Look, that UNC team ain't getting Drake May without a certain Mac Brown. Got Drake May to stay on board. Knows his way around NIL. Got Tez Walker eligible. Knows his way around the NCAA. Knows his way around the Lone Star State. That much we know. God, I love Mac Brown, though. That would be great. But the truly funniest and perfectly wild, blow everything up that you thought you knew about this sport hire that Matt Hayes threw out a couple of weeks ago, that I would just, oh my God, in the content creation business, we'd be salivating at the mouth if this happened. Dabo.
Oh my gosh, that's the one.
That's the one.
That's the one.
That's it. That's the one.
It's perfectly with, what's his name? The caller, what was his name?
Tyler from Spartanburg.
Tyler from Spartanburg. Just in time. That's when he comes out. If I would put out a statement if I was him and be like, well, some of our fans have been a little bit upset lately. I don't know what my future is here. I would say that at the Wednesday press conference if I was him, just to freak everybody out.
I've actually been thinking about that since Matt wrote about it. You can read the entire article on SaturdayNightTalk.com. That was a couple of weeks ago. You might have to Google search that one. But the fit of Dabo replacing Jimbo would just be so weird. But A&M's knock is that it's a cult culture, right? It's that it lives in this very unique bubble in which only certain people get. Dabo's got that at Clemson. Like from a culture standpoint, yeah, there could be a little bit of shock. I don't really think of Dabo and think, yeah, it's a Texas guy. But a guy who's already recruited nationally has probably brought in his fair share of recruits from the state of Texas. I don't have that list right in front of me, but a guy who would be able to move the needle in so many different ways and would just be even splashier. Well, wait, the guy who had, Claire's chiming in. She doesn't really like the idea of Dabo to A&M.
Big transfer portal, girly.
Yeah, exactly. Wait, so you hired the guy with one ring and it didn't work out. Hire the guy with two. And then you're good. That was your mistake, A&M.
And their names are Jimbo and Dabo.
Look, I'm not saying I'm rooting for it. I ain't rooting against it. I'll tell you that. Man.
Listen,
just give me
you're
research.
talking to a guy who was Googling the distance between A&M's campus and Joel Osteen's church 2 weeks ago because somebody was like, oh, where would Dabo fit in? And I was like, who seems like a mega church pastor? Texas would eat him up, brother. They would love that.
I mean, there are worse matches that I've heard. Who knows? Just who knows, man. Okay, any other thoughts on that before we talk about actual games that were played on Saturday?
Oh, let me throw okay, so there's two that I would be a little bit scared of if they hire DeBoer. Like you said, though, probably going into the Big Ten. That's why you go into the Big Ten, so you'll just get scoops for guys like that. I think Lance Leopold would be a pretty solid one. I know maybe he's not this great recruiter or anything, but he's won the big games. He's brought Kansas out of the dumpster in a reclamation project. Not really quite reclamation project here, but seems like a guy I'd love to see him with some more resources. So that seems like the pretty logical. In the old world of college football, that's who you go after. I don't know what you do now.
Yeah, that is hiring the Kansas coach is considered the least splashy hire. It just is, despite the fact that he's obviously tremendously good at his job. I don't think that they would go in that direction. Never say never, because I don't know where this search is going to go. I think it's going to be far and wide. I would love to know if they really have that zeroed in list of candidates, and if it's like 2 to 3 deep, or they think they're going to, because when this hire happened, this initial Jimbo hire happened 6 years ago. It was one of those things where there are a lot of people, probably even myself included. I could probably find places in which I said, "Why would Jimbo Fisher leave Florida State? Why would he leave the ACC to go compete in the SEC?" And that was kind of becoming the consensus feeling. Oh, the LSU thing didn't happen. Oh, okay, so that means that A&M will. And I think that there was at least at the time this, no, it'll never happen. No, it'll never happen. And then it just kind of happens. You're like, oh God, I guess they are willing to go to these lengths. And this hire could be like that again. It very much could be. And trying to right the wrong, trying to be able to move on, and try not to be the punching bag of college football, because A&M fans, I'm sorry, but that's what you are right now. That is what you are. Not you specifically, but your program, because of spending as much money as you did, and to have consecutive seasons in which not consecutive, 3 consecutive seasons in which you've been wildly disappointing. 11-11 last 2 seasons. I'm not going to cut it. It's just not. So that's why we're at this point. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting week or two to hear all these. It's going to go every which way, man. Every which way. All right, actual football, Will. Let's talk about I'm gonna dub this Superstar Saturday in the SEC. We had Jayden Daniels, Cody Schrader, Jalen Milroe. Brock Bowers played. We got 32 minutes into this podcast, so we talked about Brock Bowers playing. 4 weeks to come back from tightrope surgery? Screw that. No, I'm coming back. I'm playing. Top 10 matchup. No big deal. I'm going to score a touchdown. Show everybody that said I wasn't going to play the rest of the year, that they had no idea what they were talking about. I'm not an actual human being. Let's start with that one right there. Oh, and by the way, SEC championship is officially set. Georgia, Alabama, just in case you didn't realize that last week and wanted to wait for it to be official. But yes, that is locked in the books. Ole Miss.
Ole Miss fans, if you're wondering why we're being a little bit disrespectful, like, oh, they were still got to beat Georgia. Here's why. You saw it.
Look, we saw why. If I had told Georgia fans that they could either beat Ole Miss by 35 or they'd get Brock Bowers back and whatever happens, I think they would have taken the Ole Miss win. I think. I don't know that, but I wouldn't have in any world said, Georgia fans, you want both of those things? That'd be greedy.
The sun smiles on you once again, University of Georgia.
Good Lord. No, apparently that's not greedy for Georgia. I did a 180 this week on the Brock Bowers conversations. I came into this week hearing all this stuff from Georgia about Brock Bowers playing, and at first I kind of rolled my eyes. I'm like, guys, let's pump the brakes. I mean, goodness, even Tua needed 4 weeks to come back. He had 4 weeks in between games, but that was the short end of this, and he's playing a much different position. And I was talking to Chase Thomas about this, who hosts Chase Thomas podcast, and he's saying, I saw Cedric Tillman come back from this and wasn't the same player. And there is just a different set of expectations for an in-season surgery like this. But then I thought, wait a minute. Why am I rolling my eyes when I hear Georgia fans be ambitious about Brock Bowers returning from this? This is Brock Bowers, unconfirmed human being. Of course he's going to come back early. Why wouldn't he? If there was ever a guy who was just going to scoff at the 4-week minimum return from tightrope surgery, it was going to be Brock Bowers. And I am so glad that as we watch this game, that we have Brock Bowers back in our lives. I don't have a dog in this fight, pun intended. Brock Bowers would be my dog in every single fight. He would. And I don't know that it's fair to say Bowers returning set the stage for that atmosphere, because top 10 showdown at night in Athens, it was going to have juice no matter what. But you can't tell me that Bowers suiting up and adding another chapter to his ridiculous legacy didn't add at least some juice to that place. Herbstreit brought it up on the broadcast, Will, how amazing it was that Bowers was basically out there every snap. He said that in the fourth quarter. And on the very next play, beautiful play design by Bobo, perfect throwing catch from Beck to Bowers for 6. The ideal exclamation point on a truly dominant victory. I mean, this guy is making me rethink what is possible of not just the tight end position in college football, but just football players in general. And I don't think it's hyperbole to say something like that. I couldn't believe he was out there in the starting lineup, and I couldn't believe he played as much as he did, but God, it was great to see him back out there doing Brock Bowers things.
Yeah, I mean, the point that I know, and mind you, like LSU Florida was out at the same time. I don't know, side TV I was watching, but the point that I noticed, point being, I wasn't like watching the pregame or anything. The point that I noticed, he was just getting fully interfered with for the entirety of one play. And I was like, oh my God, that's Brock Bowers. It's like, yeah, they're aware of him. They're scared of him already. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like the amount of fear that kind of guy coming back brings back. And this is the most like, this might just be the most Kirby one of all time. You got 300 rushing yards, 311 passing yards. All things are equal. Lad McConkey's making ridiculous grabs. You look up and Brock Bowers has a touchdown in this game. It's like everything just, this was the, when Kirby goes to sleep at night and he's dreaming little dreams, he dreams of this game.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. I mean, Ole Miss was looking like this was going to be some fun back and forth high scoring game. They have that TD on the opening drive, the lane script. It's humming. They're feeling good, and then they have one touchdown the rest of the way. That's it. That Georgia staff pretty good at making those defensive adjustments. Did not matter that Jamon Dumas Johnson was out. They worked through those communication issues that they were having early on, and that was not an issue at all in the second half. I bought a lot of CJ Allen stock last week, and I want a lot more after seeing some of the things that he was doing and his instincts in space, man. It is not fair that Georgia can just have Nakobe Dean or Monty Rice, a guy that people forget about, Roquan Smith, like these guys who are so disciplined in the middle of that defense. They're just not afraid. They're just not afraid at all. They'll just stick their nose right into the action. Nothing's going to fool them. You're not going to get them with window dressing or anything like that. And they just blow up plays. Like this is just what they are built to be able to do. And for a team without a game wrecker up front, Georgia's defense still just does some scary things like that. And like just being able to go out there and throw out a true freshman, a talented one, obviously, but just be like, oh yeah, you're going to go play in a top 10 showdown and you're not going to be the reason that we're on our heels all night. Instead, you're going to be one of the reasons why we win this game, why we dominate this game. Quinshon Judkins never really got into a groove after he had a nice start. Ole Miss only had 172 total yards after the first quarter. Jackson Dart kind of got sandwiched late, and I hope he's all right. I really do, because he's had a great year. He has kind of put those splits that I talked about coming into the season behind him, and he's actually been really good against quality competition. But man, he needs to live to fight another day some of these times instead of just taking some of those hits, man. Just getting sandwiched between 550 pounds of meat. Golly, like
that's horrible.
Yeah. Like, dude, go out of bounds. Go out of bounds. Oh man. And he does that a lot. And that's part of the reason why I kind of wince watching him play. Is as much as you love that as a fan, some of those hits that he takes, you're just like, man, you just don't need to. There's a reason why Pat Mahomes doesn't take hits like this. It's because he wants to live to fight another day and keep playing football. And Jackson Dart, unfortunately, in that spot, probably wishes he could have that one back. Hopefully he's able to go. We did see a little bit of Spencer Sanders, but this was a tough reality check for Ole Miss, and I get that. And we talk all the time about Lane and the lack of truly elite wins that are on his resume as a head coach, and it's what prevents him from being in that tier one. But here's what I think is worth noting with this. This is going to sound like I'm kind of giving Ole Miss fans a moral victory on the season, because it's still been a season that blew out my expectations. No denying that. If you told any college football fan your team is going to face Bama, LSU, and Georgia in the regular season, what would be your hope, right? Like, just probably steal one. Tennessee got two of those last year.
Next question: do they have Matt House?
Good point. That's a good point. Yeah. Yes, and hopefully you can steal one. But even that wasn't a given. I mean, that was a down to the wire game. Like, Tennessee last year got two of those. They had all three of those teams on their schedule, and getting two of them felt like a really big deal, and in part because of obviously the lack of success that Tennessee had in the previous decade plus. But still, that is just not an easy thing to do, and it's a reason why your ceiling is not as high. It's as simple as that. You face those three teams in a season, your hope is one, two is a big deal. You're not supposed to get three. Ole Miss got one. Ole Miss is also still in really good shape to make a New Year's Six Bowl. Could be like just win the Egg Bowl and you're in a New Year's Six Bowl. I mean, that could still line up for Ole Miss. And so that's kind of the silver lining, despite the fact that obviously those playoff dreams, I guess the West title dreams came to an end with Bama beating Kentucky. But any outside chance that you had of being like a one-loss non-division champ team to sneak into the playoff with some chaos, that is now off the table in a very humbling way against the two-time defending national champs.
Yeah, I think that I think there's kind of that, the hard ceiling we talked about at Ole Miss. And, unfortunately, if, last week we were coming here and talk about how Mizzou balled out, played their butts off, made it a fourth quarter game, really impressed me, in a loss. I think Ole Miss kind of did the opposite of that. I'll be honest with you. Like, I think that, not all wins, not all seasons are created the same. And I think that we still have some of the same questions about Lane. The wilted in the back half of the Bama game, came against Georgia and lost by what felt like a billion. Yeah, I don't think it says anything about like, this is an indictment or anything. It just didn't. This was a season that could have changed perception about Lane and Ole Miss, and I think this was just kind of on the upper end of what we thought they were capable of. I don't think this changed my opinion of Ole Miss. Is that fair?
Yeah, I agree. And I was definitely early on with Lane, and this is year 4, so that's not early by SEC standards. But I was the person saying it's so stupid if we cap the ceiling at what they did in 2021 with Matt Corral, and if we say this is as good as Ole Miss can be. I've definitely come around a lot more to that. I think that there is definitely a case to be made. And you see even like, they just don't have the depth on the offensive line right now. They're dealing with offensive line. It looks like they were going to be healthy coming into this home stretch of the season. It turns out they're not. They're still trying to move pieces around and make it work. You just can't do that against a team like Georgia. Even a team like Georgia that doesn't have its stud linebacker available, you're just going to be in over your head in that atmosphere on the road. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's perfectly fair to say this is what the ceiling looks like. And it's still so much higher than it's been throughout the vast majority of your program's history. And
this is still massive for like this hire was amazing. It's worked out really well for you that you kept playing, from the Auburn job and everything. And it's like, I think this is your dream as Ole Miss, is your fun. I think they're a super fun team. I think every week you could tell yourself we could beat anybody. They could upset some teams. But yeah, I think that, this is where college football gets lost, especially with the expansion of the playoff and everything. It's like, I think Ole Miss fans are super happy right now. I don't think that it's like, the last championship or common championship was in like the 60s. I think that being right there and having a chance, especially with, the way things are going, Saban can't be at Alabama forever. Brian Kelly, you never know what he's going to be on a year-to-year basis. So being a team that has a chance to sneak up and just kind of capitalize on some of this misfortune. And you could make that argument Bama was kind of there this year, but I don't know. I mean, I don't think that's going to be this. While Ole Miss's talent and ability, I think, feels pretty right here, there's no guarantee that the SEC is just always going to be, or the SEC, well, there will be no SEC West. But, I don't know. It's super interesting when you think about what the future is. I mean, this team, I think, could be fighting with the playoff.
Well, think about that. If this were 2024, we would say it's a bummer that Ole Miss just got rolled by Georgia, but at the same time, they are still in really good position to be able to make the college football playoff. And the perspective of that changes. And who knows, maybe if we'd be talking about a first round matchup of Ole Miss and Ohio State, or Ole Miss and Notre Dame, or Ole Miss and Florida State, something like that, we're just like, what if Ole Miss win a playoff game? That's going to change for a lot of different teams. That will change the perspective of how we view you on a national stage. And Ole Miss is one of the teams that could stand to benefit from it, despite the fact that I think we have a pretty hard ceiling of who they are within the SEC confines. As for Georgia,
I'm ready for who they are.
We know who Georgia is. I'm now officially ready for Georgia to be number 1. I am. When that Tuesday ranking show comes out, I'm ready to bang the drum that Georgia deserves to be on that top line. And you can tell me it doesn't matter. This will all sort itself out. But to beat consecutive top 15 teams, and not have, I mean, Mizzou was a 9-point win. I still think we'd call it a fourth quarter game, not a down to the wire game, I guess is probably the better way to say it.
It can be convincing without being a blowout.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, Mizzou had a chance to take the lead in the fourth quarter. Georgia holding on to a 27-21 win. The Stackhouse interception obviously put that to bed. The legendary Stackhouse interception. But both of those teams have just 2 losses, Ole Miss and Mizzou. Those wins stack up with what Ohio State has, the Notre Dame Penn State combo. I would argue that Georgia being that decisive against Ole Miss, I think that makes their resume better. I do at this point. I think it makes it better than Ohio State's. I don't think they can just default to those 2 wins anymore without giving Georgia that kind of respect. And obviously they still have the one more top 25 showdown against Tennessee coming up to be able to get through this stretch. But to me, I think they have already earned the right to be considered number 1. It's just more of a talking point. Now, obviously Kirby loves having a little bit of juice. Talk about that in the pregame. He's like, yeah, people are still doubting us. He's still got his entire locker room believing that. It's unbelievable despite the fact that they've won 27 games in a row and just had a winning streak that is longer than any that Nick Saban has had at Alabama, which is crazy to think about. But still, I think Georgia would be at number one. And if they were at number two, I think Kirby would actually have a legitimate gripe that his team's not being respected.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best part. It's like they're like the anti-Ohio State. It's like the most dangerous team in America is number 2 Georgia. It's like, oh, you got to give us that little extra to get up. Yeah, I think Kirby would rather be number 2 until, New Year's Eve. I think that because I think they're at a point too where they really could beat anybody. I mean, match up. We're not trying to hide from somebody. There's not some big team at the top or like creeping up like a one-loss team that you're worried about if you're Georgia. So yeah, I think it's all just fun and games at this point, and there's really not. Again, I want to once again joke about Georgia's schedule. It's like, are you all happy now? Like literally, you're gonna, like you said, you're gonna get Tennessee coming in. You got Mizzou, who we just talked about. Great. I mean, rolled this week, that Mizzou team, amazing. And then also, yeah, I mean, Ole Miss, who beat LSU, has been, right there. Like I said, yeah, they collapsed against Alabama, but it was one of Alabama's more, competitive games. So yeah, I think that's pretty much the jokes about the schedule, which as we always talk about Oklahoma thing getting destroyed by like new college football, nothing they could have done about that. But yeah, I think this is turning into a very strong schedule. And when you end up playing, and I think probably eventually beating Alabama in the SEC championship, it's going to be just another trophy on the wall,
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily a given, but I think for right now, I think their resume is stacking up really, really well.
You know who knows how to put a spy on the quarterback? Kirby Smart. I don't think he's letting that happen for 4 quarters.
This is true. Good point. Let's talk about that Mizzou team that rolled on Saturday. Mizzou fans, I need you to do me a favor. I don't want you to look at the timestamp right now and say, Connor, how did you get this deep into the podcast before shouting out Mizzou? First of all, I did bring up Cody Schrader earlier in the pod, so don't hold me to the fire too much. The plan
we had
was
to laugh at Jimbo and Ole Miss, our 2 favorite things. You're right there. You're number 3.
Did not plan on having a half hour of talking about Jimbo Fisher and that coming to an end in College Station. So that was not the plan for today. I usually reserve Toby Keith games for coaches. I think it's just a little bit, kind of see the similarities. I'm going to make an exception because Cody Schrader just had himself a how do you like me now game. Well, that was unbelievable. First SEC player to ever have 200 rushing yards and 100 receiving yards in the same game. He had 316, or my bad, I sold him short. 326 scrimmage yards on 40 touches. 40 touches. Woo! He was unreal, man. Unreal. Not bad for a former D2 transfer who Drink gave a spot to as a walk-on. Was like, yeah, he'd be 6th on our running back depth chart. I'm sure. I look forward to you playing a lot of snaps. A lot of confidence in that. But man, he was so dialed in that his most impressive play of the day might have been at the end of the first half where he gets that run up the middle and the clock is winding down. They need to be able to get, they still had 2 timeouts left, I think. And he needs to be able to get down so that Mevis can attempt a long field goal. And he does that even on a play where he sets him up in the middle of the field and he's not like going out of bounds. And it's not a play that takes too long. And he goes down at the exact right time. It sets up that field goal. At the time, it felt significant because you're like, all right, it's 13-7. This is going to be a kind of a 60-minute low scoring type game. Every point matters.
This game was throwing the most insane throw so far. God, that game opened up so fun and just ended in a beatdown.
Yep. Yeah, it did, man. It really, really did. It was not decided by a field goal. It was a statement for Mizzou. Loud statement. Biggest win in a decade. Biggest win of the playoff era for those Missouri Tigers. First time winning a matchup of ranked teams since the A&M Manziel game, 2013, that clinched Mizzou's East title. I mean, that right there. They blew the opportunity against LSU, it felt like, and they were able to come back and beat a Tennessee team that was in the top 15. First time beating top 15 teams at home, multiple top 15 teams at home in the same season since 1976. This is the first time that they've had 4 consecutive sellouts since the Jimmy Carter administration, Will.
Oh, man. Record falling left and right.
Left and right, all over the place. This was a beatdown. And I'll admit, I was wrong to say that Luther Burden's status would flip how I felt about this. I said Mizzou, I would pick to win, knowing like as long as Burden is out there. And if he's not, then I wouldn't. he played, but he really wasn't himself. And I know that he had the late touchdown, nice little design by Kirby Moore to kind of get him feeling good about his performance in space there. But Mizzou had 300 yards in the first half, and Burden had 5 of them. That's it. I thought Mizzou was playing so well early on, even though Brady Cook had a little bit of a slow start. That pick, you're like, oh, this is 2021 Brady Cook. That's not the guy that they need to be able to win a game like this in the year 2023. Mizzou loses their leading tackle, Hopper, and you're just kind of like, oh, no big deal. They're going to find a way. And they did. They hammered a top 15 team. And while I think Tennessee has its issues, for Mizzou to win this game so convincingly, we got peak drink. Peak drink. We had the icy handshake with Heupel last year, the blowout. Is he running up the score? Is he not? Flip the script. Down 36-7. Josh Heupel wanted a field goal in the final minute. Drink called a timeout to ice him. Tennessee missed the field goal. Post-game interview on CBS. Drink said there was some unfinished business from last year. He declared Mizzou the Tennessee state champs.
Because, I love that. I love that.
Man, Mizzou became the first team to ever beat 4 FBS teams from the state of Tennessee in the same season. What a wild, weird stat that is. He also added, yeah, our defense kicked Tennessee's ass. Yep, they did. 7 points. That is the lowest for a Josh Heupel coach team, not just at Tennessee, but at UCF as well. Lowest since, I went back and looked this up, the lowest offensive output for Heupel since his days as a coordinator with Mizzou. The last time that Josh Heupel had an offensive day that bad was against who? There's less than 1% chance you can name this unless you already looked this up too.
Oh, man. I'm going to say Kentucky?
It's not a bad guess, but no. Purdue.
Yeah, I was not going to get that. That's funny.
Yeah, nobody was thinking Purdue. Tennessee averaged 228 rushing yards coming into this one. They finished with 83. They led the nation with an average of 194 rushing yards via the tailbacks. Those guys combined for 47. I have no idea why Dylan Sampson didn't get a carry until like late in the third quarter, and I'm pretty sure it was called back on a holding penalty anyways. Tennessee had 4 offensive series in the first half. Mizzou executed that game plan, and a rhythm offense had no chance to get in rhythm. That was bad. And Tennessee had some dumb turnovers. The Jalen Wright fumble was really unfortunate. Milton's hand on one of those passes where he's got his running back just to his right, hits the running back, and it's a fumble. And that's kind of a weird, freaky thing. And then obviously the pick six did not help matters for Tennessee. But the moral of the story, Mizzou is really good. Mizzou is a darn good football team, man. Like, there is no reason why this team should not go 10-2, earn a New Year's Six bowl bid, and feel awesome about the year that they had. And again, another team, like we talked about with Ole Miss, if this were a year later, we'd be talking about Mizzou potentially setting up for a playoff berth. And that's how perspective will change, because a lot of people in a game like this are like, oh yeah, you know what? Both of these teams have multiple losses. Doesn't impact the playoff. I'm not really going to care. Never mind the fact that it's 3:30 CBS. Like, whatever. It's a fun story. No, Mizzou is just good. Mizzou is good. They have so many different ways in which they can beat you. And I thought Burden not being the best version of himself in this one and still having that kind of performance, that to me was so telling. And Tennessee is not going to make it back to a New Year's Six bowl unless they beat Georgia and then get some help to be able to get in there. 9-3 is kind of like, you're pushing it. So probably not going to happen, but Mizzou is still very much in line for that. A loud statement by the home Tigers on Saturday.
I joke a lot about statement wins on here because everyone wants to talk about, a lot of games, a couple of plays, that could go from a blowout to a closing. This was a statement. This was like when they got out there, you talked about classic of both of these teams, a 20-play drive for Mizzou that ended in 3 points. And then boom, other side of that, 6 plays, ridiculous touchdown for Tennessee. And you're like, oh God, here it comes. Here's Heupel versus Drink. You got the guy who's got this fast offense, da-da-da. And no, they just came out there and beat the stew out of them. I mean, everything that Tennessee does well. And like I texted you about like the throw. I went back and watched that throw that Milton
the Dante
had.
Thornton. The Dante
Yes.
Thornton throw? Yeah.
Yes, that was one of the most confusing looking touchdowns I've ever seen. That ball hung in the air for a full 5 seconds. And if you're sitting there at home, I want you to count out 5 Mississippi right now and think about a football being in the air that long and how effortlessly he threw that football. I was thinking to myself, I texted you, I was like, if I could do that, they'd have to bench me because I do it 10 times a game. I would just be letting that thing fly. But Joe Milton is built from a different cloth. He does not want to throw the ball down the field. He's 6'5". He does not want to run people over. Me, I would be dunking on people in my free time. I'd be at the UT Rec Center just dunking on freshmen and then just sitting in the quad launching footballs over just like, hey, pretty lady, how's it going? I would be like an Instagram account, but he doesn't do that. He doesn't have that dog in him. They can't generate deep plays for whatever reason. And this is just a great example of like, this is what I was worried about when Heupel came to the SEC, is against these type of teams. And he would be the guy that we saw at Mizzou with Drew Lock, who would put up all these gaudy numbers when it didn't matter. And then he would just turtle in these big games. And it's exactly what it was. And I'll just say one thing about Drink, too. You know, Drink is a guy that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way over the last couple of years where he struggled. But he was a guy that, you know, we early, like, you know, he's a friend of the pod and everything. And I'm glad that he has made this interesting because he's an interesting dude. I think that it's underrated how kind of like quirky and funny he is. And when he's winning, how he does like this fun, like, you know, the Tennessee State championship stuff. I want as many personalities as possible in college football. I hate like the boring guys. And so, yeah, I think that this is a guy that like his team being good and kind of wacky is like really fun as a casual viewer.
Yeah, if he gets up there on the post-game broadcast in CBS and is just saying, "Oh, Tennessee, that's a great football team out there. I'm so proud of our guys. Just rally the troops." That's what like 95% of coaches say in that spot. And we've heard that a million times over, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to criticize a coach for saying that, but I'm also not going to shun a coach when he actually goes after the opposing team. He calls them out. He does petty stuff. I've been saying for a bit, I think we need more of that in the SEC. He's not Steve Spurrier, obviously, but we need a little bit of that Spurrier vibe at times. And it's kind of fun to see that play out. And in a game like that, in which, yeah, he's feeling himself. You better believe he's feeling good. He just had his best moment probably as a head coach, including his time at App State. And he's like, man, this is how it's supposed to feel. I've been hearing doubt, and understandably so. When you're stuck on that plateau and we say, oh, we think you have a hard ceiling, and then you show everybody, no. We do not have a hard ceiling. We're gonna go out and we're gonna beat a Tennessee team that everybody was picking to beat us in the preseason, and understandably so. Bummer for Tennessee, by the way, that Dante Thornton had that play, a play that Tennessee fans probably thought they were going to be seeing week after week after week after he transferred from Oregon, had all of that buzz in camp, and he gets hurt on that, his first touchdown as of all. And you're just like, man, it's kind of been the year. Yeah, kind of been what it's felt like at times for this passing game, is one step forward, two steps back. They've obviously really missed Brew McCoy, but suddenly depth is just kind of an issue in the Tennessee passing game. And when you don't necessarily have a guy that's going to make everybody else better in that regard, I don't think that's what Joe Milton is built to do. That's not to say he doesn't have skills, and I think that he was playing really well coming into this, but you see what it can look like against a really good defense that's fired up, that's disciplined, and Blake Baker that group was one step ahead the entire day. And even that play, it's like it's man coverage. You know, Dante Thornton makes a really nice play on a beautiful ball by Joe Milton. You're like, all right, sometimes that happens. If they could take advantage of man coverage in a spot like that, you'll give it to them. But more times than not, they were able to confuse that Tennessee offense and prevent them from being able to string scoring drives together. And you're right, it was a loud statement for Mizzou. Georgia's resume gets a little bit better, but then also you're like, all right, going into the Tennessee game, it's a little bit worse, knowing that they're not going to be in the top 15. But still, the East has a legitimate second place team, and it's very clearly Mizzou. Even though this was a second place game of sorts, this was a game that Mizzou won decidedly, and it kind of confirmed what they showed at Georgia, in my opinion. If you were saying that this team is a fraud, I don't think you watched on Saturday and felt like this team was a fraud.
Mm-hmm.
Should we talk about your game, Will? Let's do it.
Sure.
Florida and LSU. I am old enough to remember when I wasn't sure if Jayden Daniels was going to play football on Saturday. Wasn't that long ago. It was probably like probably Wednesday, actually. Yeah, late Wednesday was the last time I thought to myself, oh man, we might see Garrett Nussmeier in this game. Nope. Jayden played, and he got every blade of grass that he wanted. Every one of them.
A touching tribute to Les Miles. Every blade of grass disintegrated.
I didn't even think of that. 604 total yards in this game. First player in FBS history with 300 passing yards and 200 rushing yards in a game. Longest run by an LSU quarterback ever. Well, longest touchdown run. 85 yards to the house. Just scooting at a level that, man, I didn't even think he had that kind of speed in his bag. And I feel like we've praised him at every turn this year. Well, we're kind of numb to gaudy quarterback numbers. Okay, I think we are in this era, this pass heavy era of the sport. You know what I'm not numb to? 12 carries for 234 rushing yards by a quarterback. The dude averaged 19 and a half yards per carry. That is the type of line that you would see from Michael Vick playing in high school or something. And you're like, oh, okay, so just nobody could tackle him. And then you see it and you're like, oh yeah, Michael Vick should not be on the same field as all of those guys. That's what it felt like.
The numbers that we can question the competition. Where it's like, oh, is he in 2A? Like, all right, man. Like Derrick Henry high school numbers.
Seriously, like, all right, Derrick Henry is playing high school competition. Come on, get out of here with that. He looked so vastly better than anybody on that defense. And I'm pretty sure at one point, Jayden just felt bad that Brian Thomas got a holding penalty that took part of that Malik Neighbors catch and run off the, like, he still had the catch, but it was like a holding penalty kind of laid into it. And, you know, they had to bring it back a little bit. And Jayden, I'm assuming, just felt bad that Brian Thomas got that called on him. So on the very next play, he just throws that dime to him in the back of the end zone. And you're like, how is it this easy? How is this guy making this sport in every facet look that easy? And Brian Kelly,
wait,
nice little pad.
I'll do you one better real quick. I'll do you one better. At the goal line, and like an important sequence, snap the ball, Brian Thomas wide open. Looks at Brian Thomas, looks to the middle of the field, sees Neighbors open as well. Looks again. He's got 5-6 seconds. He looks around. Hits Noah Cain. I swear he goes, Noah Cain's been playing really hard in practice. I think he deserves a touchdown. I swear to God, Brian Thomas was open that whole play. It was his first read. He looks at him and he goes, too easy. Let me hit Noah Cain.
I had the same thought as you. I had the same thought of you. At that point, it was, let's get this guy involved, man. He's been kind of what we look. He hasn't necessarily had things go his way. I know Noah Cain's an All Bang the Drum Team member from a couple years ago, but let's get that guy some love. You're right. He was that dialed in. He could just do whatever he wanted. And I thought at the end there, you're seeing a coach who wants his player to win the Heisman Trophy. There's no doubt whatsoever. The little pop pass at the end makes it look like it's a run, but it's really not. And it's a nice little way to give Jayden the TD pass. Brian Thomas, yeah, just really smart move. Jayden earned those numbers. I mean, let's not pretend like this is just Brian Kelly being Brian Kelly, but he wants his quarterback to win the award. You're not playing for an SEC title. You are probably not getting to a New Year's Six Bowl, or if you are, you just never know. You could have opt-outs, whatnot. It could be a much different game than what you've seen from your team in the regular season. Getting Jayden Daniels to New York would be Brian Kelly's first Heisman finalist on the offensive side of the ball. Manti Te'o got there in 2012. People forget that.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll say about that. I said to Bear Felica on this show a couple of weeks ago that there was probably not a world in which Jayden could win the Heisman if he lost to Bama. I'm walking that back. I hate that I said that. I wish I could just edit that out of the podcast that I said that, because I am prepared to fight anyone who dismisses what he is doing. If someone tells you that J.J. McCarthy and his 8 passes in a make or break game is more worthy of the Heisman than Jayden Daniels, you can just walk away from that conversation. Don't use violence. It's not worth your time.
Right. If
that doesn't work, as I tweeted.
Because you know it'll be caught on tape. So if you say something, it'll come back to haunt you.
Yeah, like whatever.
If you're fighting the Michigan fan.
Yeah, just don't do it. They're recording it. They're always recording it. They're always wearing 2 pieces of gear as per the Michigan standard. But, all you got to do, just maybe if you don't want to slap them physically, just slap them with a little knowledge. That's all you got to do. He is now over 4,000 yards, 38 total touchdowns. That is with 2 pre-Heisman games left. Georgia State is basura against the pass. I know we don't disrespect Sean Elliott on this show, friend of the program. They're basura against the pass. A&M has been bad against good offenses. And after the way that things have played out in College Station, who knows? This could be a we are checked out scenario for all the defensive talent that they have there. I won't rule out Jayden scoring 6 touchdowns in each of the next 2 weeks, hitting 50 touchdowns, and following the 2007 Tim Tebow path to the award. I don't think that's crazy. Tebow, RG3, Lamar, they all won the Heisman with 3 pre-Heisman losses. You cannot tell me, as we sit here post week 11, that Jayden Daniels has not been one of the 3 best players in college football. It's as simple as that. He was unbelievable. And I just pictured you watching this entire game with just ear-to-ear smile on your face. Well, with the exception of the Andre Sam targeting call, and there's probably a couple other things that really upset you.
Yeah, I felt this way. I mean, the thing is, this game played out to me a lot like the Bama game, where we were playing against LSU's defense and the officiating for the entire game. Thank goodness they had Billy Napier instead of Nick Saban. I mean, I was never afraid of losing this game. Thank goodness. I mean, that defense, it was just, there was no sense of communication. It was knifing down the field. I literally, even when they got ahead, LSU fumbled a kickoff, and I went, okay. I mean, LSU, there was not a second in this game where I felt like Billy Napier was going to beat us. They did so much stuff wrong early. Graham Mertz is exactly where I thought he was in the postseason or the preseason. I will say this, though, going back to that, because credit to John, who asked me this question. Connor, just random pop quiz. Do you know what the most rushing yards Tim Tebow ever had in the game was?
That's a good question. I'm going to say, it's not 200, is it?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, it's, I've looked this up at some point. Is it like 185?
Mm-mm.
Don't do the thing that Lauren does where like I guess something and she doesn't give me higher or lower afterwards. You got to give me something lower, way lower. Okay. I'm going to say 164.
Wow, you're almost on the head. So it's 166. He got that in 2007 one time against Ole Miss. Jayden Daniels got 163 last week against Alabama in Tuscaloosa. And this week he got, So that Jayden Daniels has almost equaled Tebow's career high rushing yards 2 games in a row against Alabama and Florida. So, I don't know. I mean, as much as I thought that, Florida – and also, Brian Kelly, if you want to ingratiate yourself with the people of Louisiana, you did it, okay? You ran up the score in Florida. You dumped on the SEC officiating on the way out, and you tried to get your guy a Heisman. I have never been more Brian Kelly than after that game. Dude was furious on the sidelines. He was about to get ejected. He was just like me for real. I've never spent a second of my life relating to Brian Kelly until last night.
Man, I thought it was going to get weird. I thought it was going to get on that fumbled kickoff. I thought, boy, this is why this game, you just never turn your back on it. I brought up the stat in the preview pod, 11 consecutive games in which this matchup was decided by 14 points or less. Nope.
And yet, how many of the last 5 they win? None.
They have won 5 consecutive against Florida. That is the longest winning streak ever for LSU in this rivalry. It is still wild to me that the last time Florida beat LSU was 2018, and it was a game that I was at, and Joe Burrow was on the losing end.
Joe Burrow.
Yep. I mean, Joe Burrow pick 6 is the reason. I mean, not the reason, because they would have won the game without it. They still needed to march on the field and score, but like that is going to be associated with the last Florida win against LSU. For a minute, I thought maybe Florida was going to make this one of those games in which they go from a 10-point deficit to a 3-point deficit the entire fourth quarter or something, because that Louisiana running back duo of Montreal Johnson and Trevor Etienne,
man, jeez.
How many times a day do you think to yourself, it would have been, and I look, LSU's ground game has been really good this year, a game in which they didn't even have Logan Diggs available and Jayden was that good, all the more impressive, and their ground game has been great this year, but you've got to think to yourself, man, just one Etienne would have been cool. Just one,
I mean, look, if we had Diggs and played him the way they played Johnson, where he's actually an effective early down running back, it would be, I couldn't imagine this offense being better, but that would be it.
Yeah.
A read option between, anyway.
But they were good. Florida's defense, anything but good. They allowed 701 yards of offense. That's the most in a game in program history. Most ever.
How many?
701. Yeah.
Lining up against the LSU Tigers and being the worst defense is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. But they did that.
They did. They just couldn't stop anything. Couldn't stop anything. If they couldn't run the ball too, I mean, they ran the ball well, but their defense would have been out there even more. They would have been even
Yep.
more gas. Or you know what? Maybe they wouldn't have, because Jayden just gets 40-yard touchdown here, 85-yard touchdown run there, and it didn't really matter. 4 consecutive games for this Florida defense in which they've allowed at least 39 points. And you look at the upcoming schedule and you go, oh, Cody Schrader, the guy who just had that historic day, he's next. Oh, those Florida State receivers with probably the closest duo, and Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman. If there is a duo that is similar to what LSU has, it resides in Tallahassee. So there's that. Don't know where those answers are coming from for the Florida defense. I do not. Really, really bad. I am officially not too low on Florida. How about that? Because I had Florida at 7-5 this season. They're 5-5. So if anything, I'm probably going to be too high on them, because I don't think they're winning these last 2 based on how bad they look on defense. They just don't have a chance. They just don't have a chance, and they're not built to play from a deficit. That's just not the way that this team is designed with what Billy is trying to do offensively. So yeah, tough one to stomach on the Florida side, not so much on the LSU side.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the commentators saying they got to rebuild from the high school ranks was wild. They got this great recruiting class. I think the future is, still, you're already looking
Cole's
for next
right.
year.
No, Cole's right. Like, look, Billy's had some great portal evaluations, but that's how you said you were going to do this. And you're going to have to be even more aggressive in the portal, probably, because everybody's going to have you on the hot seat list. That's right. Reality. But you're going to be, like, they talked about the ebbs and flows of the portal with some of these teams. And I think Cole's 100% right, because you look at what Michigan State did early on, even Colorado, everybody's giving them all this praise early on. And it's like, oh yeah, it's actually a little bit tougher to establish a foundation if you're doing it this way. So I agree. I think they do need to rely more so on the high school ranks, and that's where you've had success so far. So, like, it's just not, it wasn't going to be an overnight thing. It should be better at this point, though. It just should.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated by this team. And like you said, dude, I keep saying it. I hate to keep saying it, but it's like we've been so kind of on the money about this team. I think, again, didn't see the Arkansas game coming. Who among us? It was the first time that team had ever won in Gainesville. And again, Billy Napier 2-0 versus history in the last 2 weeks, allowing the first loss to Arkansas in Gainesville. And then also program record for yards. So, yeah, I mean, Austin Armstrong, I never really had a scouting. It wasn't like I was in or out on the guy, but I don't know how. I mean, I guess you keep him, but I don't know what.
Do you, Will?
I don't. That's the thing. I don't know. I mean, you would assume he's high in recruiting these guys that are coming in, like Wardell Mack and those boys. But yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I think that, like, I mean, they're just a team that have gotten run all over by Ray Davis. And like at the time, remember what I said? I said, is it that this Florida defense is fraudulent, or is it that Ray Davis is that good? And at the time, we're like, Ray Davis is that good. Very simple. I think that might have been more an indictment on Austin Armstrong looking back. And Ray Davis is fine. He's a great player. But we're based on, 200 yards almost and a half and all those touchdowns, like, we were thinking he would be locked for first team SEC, which he's right there, but I don't think he's been, like, Schrader has probably passed him since then. So point being, yeah, I don't know what this team does well. I've said it since Billy got there. He drops to 11-12 since he's gotten to Florida. They now fall behind in the LSU Florida series. Every week I feel like a new graphic is coming up. But at the same time, if I'm Florida, I wouldn't fire him, because I think it's such a rebuild. And like, I've been such a guy of saying, get those losers out of there. I think this is the last year that you have any excuses for that, from any of the Mullen guys. So I think they got to win next year. And as we've talked about, it's the hardest schedule ever. So yeah. I think Mertz probably tries to come back.
Yeah, I would assume so too. You can't be playing as many freshmen against that schedule as you're playing against the schedule this year. It's pretty simple. And that's where they're really going to need to lean on that portal. And it's not going to be an excuse late in the season if you're lacking from depth, because year 3, that just doesn't fly. It just doesn't. And I wonder what that's going to look like. And I wonder if Billy is going to sit down and say, man, I don't think we can run it back with a coordinator when we had 6 consecutive bad games to end the season, because that's what they're staring at. They've had 4 consecutive bad defensive games, and they could very easily have 6 if Mizzou does what it's been doing and Florida State does what it's been doing. Well, I guess they had a rough Saturday, but still.
And also, I'll say, like, this is just goes to show, like, sliding doors, because if Jayden Daniels is not tough as freaking nails and just says, "Oh yeah, I think I'll set this Florida one out. Got to worry about my NFL draft stock." Da, da, da. Very real chance Florida wins this game. I mean, LSU did so many things. I haven't even talked about the officiating. Not worth it. It didn't matter. But didn't matter. But point being, like, I think that, like, if Nussmeier plays in this game and Daniels doesn't, and we remove the 600 and whatever yards Jayden had by himself, this game is probably favors Florida. But alas, things are different. They'd be different. So yeah, it's hard to just be like, oh, LSU is just so clearly a better team than Florida after this game because so much of it was one guy. But that guy's still on LSU, so we'll see when it matters.
I might just start muting everybody that suggests a player should sit the rest of the season. Just automatic mute. I felt like I've muted Emmanuel Acho, and he's still coming up in my timeline. I don't like that. Maybe I need to block him altogether. I'm not a block guy. It gives too much satisfaction to the other end. I'm a mute guy.
Yep.
Might have to do something like that. All right, Alabama, Kentucky. If you didn't watch this game, here is everything you need to know. By the time Kentucky attempted its fifth offensive play, Bama was up 21-0. The inverse of Kentucky's performance against Florida was this, basically. Couldn't stop Jalen Milroe. Had a 3-and-out. Couldn't stop Jalen Milroe again. Barry Brown fumble. Easy score.
Giving me flashbacks.
Yeah.
He's running again.
Sorry. I hadn't really seen a first-round knockout like that from Bama all year. I did think there was a moment when Kentucky could make things interesting in the third quarter. Bama was up 28-14. Crowd is on its feet. Bama's got 3rd and 17. Jalen Milroe, no big deal. Gets a perfectly clean pocket. Wasn't sacked in this game, by the way. Steps into a beautiful throw, crossing route. Kobe Prentice, 30 yards. That was it. Milroe was brilliant. He was awesome. And I was definitely ready for the Ty Simpson experience after Milroe took that hit to his thigh in the opening drive. I was like, oh boy, things are about to get really, really interesting. He looked pretty shaken up. I mean, they were showing him on the ground. He's attended to by trainers, goes to the sideline. He sits for one play. He had a few moments where he was limping. He had to keep, I don't know if it's like a deep thigh bruise, whatever it was. Jordan was talking about it on the broadcast, but something that continues to ramp up the pain as the game goes on, and you got to keep it loose on the sideline on the exercise bike. So he was doing that, played through it, didn't matter. 3 rushing TDs, 3 passing TDs, first player in Bama history to do that. When he starts doing those little Bryce Young flips, I'm telling you right now, live bet Bama. Live bet Bama, bet the over, do whatever you need to do, because that is the sign that Jalen Milroe is dialed in. When he can just flick it out there and he sees that guy in space and he's already rolled out of the pocket, just forget about it. And he had a bad turnover in this game. Had a bad turnover where if you just look at that, you're saying, he's making some of the same mistakes they did early in the season. Nah, you know what? It was, instead of doing the thing where he drifts out of bounds that I hate and he takes a 4-yard loss that he doesn't need to when he could have just thrown it out of bounds, he decided to throw it across his body. Bad decision. When you can be as good as he was, though, outside of that, doesn't really matter.
Listen, Jalen Milroe, we've discussed this. It's like a cat having a little salami. Jalen Milroe can have a little turnover as a treat, okay? Only if he's playing well.
Do cats like salami? Is that a thing? I didn't know that.
It's like a meme from Twitter. It's like cats can have a little salami. Jalen Milroe, if you don't waddle out of bounds, if you're hitting the guys deep, you could just throw one somebody down there somewhere. It keeps you in rhythm. It keeps people doubting you. There you go.
Yeah, it keeps. Hey, he went on with my friends at the next round, and he he called out my guy LT because LT was Lance Taylor, for those who don't know, who was saying like that early in the season he's kind of doubting him. He's like, I don't really think this guy has that it factor that these guys who've come before him had, and Jalen was just like, yeah, thank you. Like you're the reason. Like you are people like you keep me going. And he looks like a guy that is just on a different level. Didn't even have Jermaine Burton, who has become his go-to target. Even though we are admittedly not Burton guys, did not matter in a game like this. He just shows massive improvement. The pocket presence is getting so much better. Tommy Rees is so much more comfortable calling plays to Milroe's skill set. And it's obvious. Didn't even matter that Kentucky had a game wrecker like Deion Walker. Didn't even get mentioned in this game, I felt like, because the Bama offensive line was that good and Milroe was that good behind it. His path to New York was a topic of conversation after this one. It's at least a conversation. And I'm not sure that it's ever been a late season conversation for a quarterback who was benched in season and missed a start for a non-injury, non-disciplinary reason. I don't know that has happened, but he is up to 28 touchdowns. We always talk about 40 touchdowns as that magic number. It's not official. That's more so like, 40 touchdowns to be able to win the Heisman, but you can kind of wiggle around that if, certain things are working in your favor outside of that. His path to New York, and I don't think his path is winning the Heisman, but I think his path to New York is having the 2020 season. That is 20 rushing TDs, 20 passing touchdowns. He needs 4 more passing touchdowns to get there. He's at 16 right now. He needs 8 more rushing touchdowns to be able to get there. He's got 3 games to do that. And if he does that and clinches it against Georgia, he would still need to look very good in Atlanta. And he could look good in a loss and maybe still have a path to be able to get to Atlanta, depending on what those numbers look like. But I would say, if I'm betting right now, that he probably won't get there. And I only say that because there are some guys who have really looked the part from start to finish. Even if that's the case, that shouldn't overshadow how important Milroe's improvement has been. And like you said, he feeds off the doubt. That's kind of who he's been. Maybe it's a good thing. Bama doesn't need another guy getting to New York. They've had plenty of those. That's not going to move the needle for them as a program. I can't wait for Jalen Milroe against Georgia's defense. I want that matchup. I need that matchup. It's going to be awesome with the player that Milroe has become.
Yeah, I mean, hey, Bama fans have spent years convincing people the 2020 season matters, so they could just do it one more time. No, but actually, I'm excited for another offseason with Milroe. He actually seems, I actually really like him. He's like the most that we've talked about. He's like the most I've liked a Bama player in a really long time, and I'm really excited to see, not to like already turn the clock forward, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know if Auburn's maybe this will be some crazy, but like we can kind of already start looking at the SEC championship game, and I'm excited to see what what he can do, not only just in that game, but this offseason. And he's like a real candidate to be a guy who can kind of get in the lab, get in there with Tommy Rees, like learn the offense a little bit better. And like we talked about, if he does eliminate those couple of obvious things, I hate to say excited because that feels like, again, like rooting for Russia, but I think I actually would be more excited to watch him. I guess like Blake Sims was another guy that I was like, oh, this guy's fun to root for. Like he's just kind of chippy as a story like this. And so, yeah, I think I'm really interested to see what they come up with this offseason. And the amount of, I can't believe I'm saying this about Bama too, the amount of adversity he's had to deal with, not playing the USF game for whatever reason. Again, we would normally call it coaching, but yeah, I think that he has had to actually bounce back from some stuff, starting in like for Bryce Young, which was an unwinnable position, having this weird battle to start the year where, as we see, it probably should have just been his job the whole time, but you got to create the competition or whatever. So bringing in Buckner, all that stuff, it all just didn't matter. I mean, this is a team that so clearly should have won or should have lost at least another game or two. And here they are. Here they still are. I mean, Milroe has been a huge part of that reason. They've made the clutch plays when they mattered. I mean, on third down, I have nightmares about that dude running through my dreams like Freddy Krueger. That guy was unstoppable. And so, like, I just want to give him credit where it's due because he has built himself up week by week. He's gotten better. He's been really coachable, and that's what you love to see.
If Milroe and Beck come back, they're the 2 preseason Heisman favorites. That's probably fair. If Caleb Williams goes to the NFL, if Drake May is off to the NFL, Bo Nix. Let me look in the database. Yes, he's finally out of eligibility.
That was my first thought, Connor. He's coming back.
Michael Penix out of eligibility. Yeah, there is a world in which those 2 guys could return and be the preseason Heisman favorites. Jayden also finally out of eligibility. Mm-hmm. They could be the
Brady
faces. Cook. I'll give Brady Cook his flowers. We've given Mizzou a lot of credit. Not saying preseason Heisman favorite in that sort of way. Not getting there yet. All right, Auburn, Arkansas. What you saw play out on Saturday was very clearly 2 programs going in opposite directions. We don't need to dig too deep into this, but Auburn went into Fayetteville. They whipped Arkansas in a way that I don't know if Sam Pittman was going to be able to recover from. We're recording this at 12:30 on Sunday, so TBD on that. Probably going to get cold taked because why wouldn't I get cold taked? By the way, Chris Lowe has been informed that he has been fired at Texas A&M, according to Chris Lowe, ESPN. So just in case there was any lingering doubt about that by the time people are listening to this. But as it relates to Arkansas, just horrible optics. Could not be worse because Auburn showed up with bad intentions and deserved to be able to win. They played like a team who had already clinched bowl eligibility because I said last week that was in the bag. Auburn fans, you could celebrate it even though it was only win number 5. Auburn was up 21-0 in that game before Arkansas knew it hit them. before fans could even have the conversation in their chair about, man, wasn't last week against Florida, wasn't that great? This team just fighting and doing some great things. By the time they could do that, it's 21-0 at home.
Yeah.
That sucks. Auburn showed up pissed off. Arkansas just showed up like it would just pick up where it left off after Florida, and that did not happen. Auburn totally dominated in the trenches, 5 sacks, had 354 rushing yards. I went back and looked it up. It was their most against SEC competition in 7 years. I mean, golly. Think about that.
And it feels like they're always kind of doing that too. Like it feels like that's what they do. Yeah, it's crazy.
And still 7 years. That was the last time they had run for that many yards against SEC competition. Jarquez Hunter continues to roll. Peyton Thorne's ability to use his legs has been a welcome addition to this offense. And it's one of the reasons why you really didn't need to run the 2-quarterback system as long as you did with Robbie Ashford, because he's still giving you that element. It's still not a good passing offense, but who really cares? Auburn has a 3-game winning streak in SEC play for the first time since 2020. Only the second time that Auburn has had a 3-game winning streak in SEC play since the start of 2018. That's kind of weird. I mean, obviously, competition, not great. Those teams that Auburn has beat in this 3-game winning streak, they're 2-19 in SEC play. Take it for what it is. If your takeaway from watching Auburn just dominate Arkansas is that this team is now destined to beat Bama, I'd say pump the brakes. But if your takeaway is that Auburn finishing with an 8-5 record with a lot of momentum, that is on the table. Like if that's your takeaway, I'd say I'm there with you. I am. I continue to say, be patient with your post-spring quarterback transfers. History says that early in the season, it's going to be rough and you're going to have to work through some crap. If Joe Burrow had to work through some crap, if Will Levis had to work through some crap, there's a good chance that Peyton Thorne and dudes like him are going to work through some crap. He did. Yep. Give those guys time. Auburn fans probably had their patience running a little bit thin. I think some of that was the receivers, the drops, the 2-quarterback system, who's calling plays, who's not calling plays. So that probably fed into it. But I'm happy that the Iron Bowl will be an Auburn team riding high and an Alabama team riding high, assuming that both avoid disaster, both avoid major injury next week as well. So good for Auburn to be able to come out and win on the road in very convincing fashion against an Arkansas team that, in theory, had a lot to play for. Did not act like it in the least way. One of the worst efforts of the year of any team that I have seen in the SEC in recent memory, and that was for a coaching staff who could probably least afford to have one of the worst efforts of recent memory. The punt return was bad. They had another weird play later on with the fumble with Rocket where everybody thought he was down. Auburn returns it, and you're like, oh man, that totally flipped things. But that looked like a team disinterested in tackling. It was so bad, Will. No urgency whatsoever. Of all the teams who would go up 21-0 in the middle of the first quarter on the road, Auburn has to be like bottom 20 in the country in that. Okay?
Yep.
That's not been their DNA all year. And I actually thought when Arkansas got that pick, when they were down 21-0, I thought it would be a furious comeback and it would at least be a 4-quarter game. And then they settle for a field goal. They get destroyed. That did not happen. We talked about this with Matt. The optics were always going to play a big part of this with Hunter Yurachek and Sam Pittman. If I get cold taked on this again, that's life. That comes with the territory. I'm not sure Hunter Yurachek is going to have a choice. Arkansas is officially not going to a bowl game. And I'm not doubting Arkansas fans when I say this, but I cannot imagine that these next 2 home games, which are against FIU and Mizzou, I don't think those are going to have the best atmospheres when your last 2 home games cleared out in extremely favorable matchups and you left that feeling awful about your program. So if the Hogs aren't going to keep Pittman, if they would pay a buyout, that would be in the $16 million range. I've already given my rough candidate list. It's Glenn Schumann. It's Mike Elko. It's Brian Johnson. It is Dan Mullen. And let's just a wild card, just throw it in there just for the hell of it. Let's just have some fun because I think of recruiting in the state of Texas, how important that is for that Arkansas job. Tom Herman. Yeah. There are worse fits. In the right situation, I have not totally written off the idea of Tom Herman once again being a decent Power 5 head coach.
Mm-hmm. Bobby Petrino also free.
Let's not go down that road. Although Arkansas fans, look, plenty of them have said, "Hey, bring Bobby back. It's a different
Do the
world.
Mac Brown. Just be like, you know what? This is all your fault, but we'll just
Time heals all wounds, Will. It does.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's like Pittman is the only SEC coach that I will just straight up root for. Okay, he's on a rival team. I think he's a cool guy. I love his story. I love how the energy he brings. I love how everybody doubted him. I love how he turned the program around. And I think it's pretty fair to say they've been turned right back around. Not quite to where they found him, which is why they got to kind of move on. But I wasn't even ready to say that until right now. But yeah, exactly what you just said, man. I mean, they come out against Florida with like their hair's on fire. They score 14 straight, start the game, boom, and they're just hanging on. But then they have to come back. You know what I'm saying? They have to go back and win that game that they already were kind of deflated. And it's like kind of this, cute story where you have this first time OC that it's like he doesn't exactly know why everything's working, but he's just playing. He's like got lightning in the bottle. And you come out this week and it's like, Auburn, like this Auburn team, it's like you. This is one that felt very winnable, and that I joked last week about like Mizzou fans like rooting against Arkansas. It's like, yeah, that game is now going to be a complete blowout because everything that we thought was Arkansas plays really well with their backs against the wall, and that's why I don't feel as bad about the Pittman thing because it's like the things that he could hang his hat on. We talked about it. Offensive line play, atrocious, maybe the worst in the league. Guys playing hard, not giving up. They gave up almost immediately in this game. And so it's like, what do you have? What do you have left? I mean, you're going to have to replace at least one, probably, if not, you already replaced one. If not, I guess their defense is okay. I don't think it's good or anything, but maybe even if you keep Pittman, you probably got to, again, replace coordinators. So you're paying money anyway. So I think it probably is better to just have a clean break. And yeah, I mean, last year, we were sold, which would made a lot of sense, is that, offensive, defensive coordinators, not great, get them out of here, boom, basura. Now it's like they're even worse with the new guys that he brought in. Enos was a disaster of a hire. So yeah, I think it just kind of is what it is. It's just hard to sell. Okay, well, if we get another year, we can turn this back around to where I was 2 years ago. So yeah, it's just really disappointing performance because even if they needed to win this one, there's no spinning that. There would be no moral victory. But if it'd be like a down to the wire, like back and forth game, would be one thing. But this game was over so quickly, like you said. And to lose the way they have against Mississippi State and against Auburn, it's like, where do you think you fit in this conference? Do you are you cool with like 7th in the West? Like, what are we doing?
I will probably at some point, maybe in December, do a breakdown of the 21st century SEC coaches who have made it to year 5 and how that is so much more rare than we even realize. It is just not a given in this day and age. And you can have all the good vibes in the world early on, and you could be the right man at the right time for the job. And I, in my heart of hearts, believe Sam Pittman was that. To dig them out of the crap hole that was the Chad Morris era and get them to the place that they're at in 2021, which was not just one of the cool stories in college football, but one of those teams where you're like, man, like they're coming. They're doing things so well. They're establishing an identity. They've actually got things that you can buy into and say that this is sustainable, and how quickly things can change in this conference. It looks like they have changed in a very significant way for Arkansas. Let's close out. Let's whip through these last 2 games. We don't need to spend a whole lot of time in Mississippi State and A&M. A battle of third string quarterbacks.
A game that clearly mattered.
Yeah, mattered so much. Some are saying that Jalen Henderson is him. I'm not there quite yet. He might be Henderson. There we go. Come on. That's pretty good. But yeah, this game was really, really lopsided, and kind of a reminder that I think the Bobby Petrino offense works. I really do. Like some of the things that Henderson's doing, there's no way they would have been doing that in the archaic Jimbo offense, but he looked pretty good. And for a guy that hadn't thrown a ball in a game in 2 years and 8 career FBS pass attempts, didn't really know a whole lot about him, was kind of a surprising add in the transfer portal. I mean, credit him for being able to show up on that stage and deliver a performance that A&M felt like at the time it needed. Obviously, things aged very differently over the course of the next 24 hours. But yeah, it was one of those games in which if you forgot this game was on because you're dialed in to Florida and LSU and you're obviously watching Ole Miss and Georgia, then I'm not going to sit here and blame you and tell you that you needed to watch this game because it was pretty bad. Watching Mississippi State attempt to do offense is so frustrating. All I hope for at this point for Mississippi State season is that not Chris Parsons, not Mike Wright, but Will Rogers returns for the Egg Bowl. I need Woody Marks. I need Will Rogers out there for an Egg Bowl just to convince me that it can be a competitive football game, because right now they are just not playing in competitive football games. I don't expect Kevin Barbay to be back as Mississippi State offensive coordinator. Again, I hope I don't get cold taked on that one, but I don't expect him to be back. They returned the opening kick and scored 3 points the rest of the night. Like that's,
They sure did.
Yep. So that's not great. The Zach Arnett conversation needs to be had. It does. Friend of the program. I like Arnett. Maybe he was put in a tough spot. Maybe he's put himself in a tough spot with the way that these hires have played out and being at this point of his career. Maybe he wasn't ready for this opportunity. Maybe that'll be his takeaway. If they can't beat Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl, they're going to miss a bowl game for the first time since 2009. 2009. His buyout's only $9 million. They paid more to get rid of Moorhead. They did that after just 2 years. You got your AD, Zach Selman, in there. He was hired after Arnett was promoted to be the head coach, following a situation that I'm not sure any Power 5 program is ever prepared for, to have an active head coach die. And at the time, obviously the move made sense, and I've kind of praised some of Arnett's decision-making, but you just can't feel great about how this has gone. And you're about to be part of an even more competitive conference that also offers greater rewards if you can be 9-3. And if you can be part of that playoff conversation. Someone could decide that if Ole Miss just trucks Mississippi State, he's going to go in a new direction. That could very much happen. It would be, if that happens, it would be the 4th head coach post Dan Mullen, which is crazy. That's a lot, man.
Underrated what Dan Mullen did over there at this point. I honestly think he probably just should have stayed, because he would be the god in Starkville, Mississippi.
If you're Zach Selman, do you make that call? Do you make that call? You say, Dan, come home. Look, man, different situation that you had at Florida, why it didn't work out. It worked out here. We look back on this, on your run, your decade run here, and we would say this was a successful hire. Do you call him up and say, let's run it back. Let's make this happen. Let's everybody be on the same page. This is your forever home. Just something to keep in mind, something I was thinking about. And who knows where that you want to put your own stamp on a hire. I get it, but it would be fascinating to see something like that develop, and I would not rule it out.
Yeah, Mullen seems like he's not even a guy who particularly wants to do TV. I think he just gets kind of like me and wants to get some jokes off at Florida's expense, which hey, good for you. I think he's fine at it, but
I'll disagree. You're not doing this. You're not doing the all-day studio stuff if you don't like TV. Yeah. You're just doing games. The all-day studio stuff is a grind, and he does the Thursday night with our friend Matt Barry, who I'll get on the show hopefully in the next couple of weeks here, and then he does the studio stuff all day Saturday. If you don't like football, you're not doing that. And if you don't like doing the analyst stuff, because that is a long day.
Yeah, no, I mean, fair. I think too, your schedule as a football coach, you're just never going to get as hard as a college football coach schedule too. So that's probably a walk in the park for that, even if he wasn't crazy about recruiting, like Kirby Smart said. But yeah, I would do that. I think it's a move. And Arnett gives me vibes of 2 different Louisiana coaches for 2 different reasons. He stylistically gives me the vibes of Dave Aranda. I think that Dave Aranda is so similar to Zach Arnett in that they both are 3-3-5 enjoyers. They're both defensive masterminds, not great leaders of men. I think we could pretty well say that after a couple of years from these guys. I think that they are the best defensive coordinators in the sport. I think they are literally up there 1 and 2. I think that being head coach is a little bit harder. Another guy, Dennis Allen, right? Sean Payton leaves, is a huge personality. Sure. He was the one who was standing in front of anyone, soaking up all the sunlight, saying, come at me, talk about me, say bad things about me. And Dennis Allen is just hiding in the background, having a great defense. He was everybody's favorite guy. He gets promoted and looks like he's a little bit in over his head. So I feel that for Arnett, you can be a really great at your job and not be great at the people part of it. And it's impossible to learn that in a way. So I think that, like you say, he was put in a terrible position. I think they made the right hire in giving this guy a chance, because I think he would have probably been out of there to go be a great defensive coordinator at Alabama or something. Because we wanted him. So everybody wanted this guy and he kept staying by Mississippi State. So I think it was a good job for both sides to say, okay, you're going to get this shot here. But yeah, I just don't know what you can build on after this year, because you came into the year with a chance to have the all-time SEC passing yardage leader, and it felt like a bunny. It felt like if he was pretty mid all year, he would still get that record. And he got injured, and the offense has been horrible. Even with a solid run game and running back and Marks, they just have not gotten it going. So yeah, I don't know what to sell with hope, and I'm right there with you. If you call Dan Mullen the answers, I'm calling Arnett next.
I know, right? Look, who knows how this is going to play out, but I think we're going to have a lot more things to talk about with Mississippi State, and definitely looks like we're going to have at least one change. I'd be very, very surprised if they ran it back with that offense. Okay, Vandy, South Carolina. Not a whole lot that we need to dig into with this one. This was South Carolina's offense doing what it's kind of done throughout most of the season, really. And the Spencer Rattler Xavier Legette connection is still so unbelievably good, and he's incredibly fun to watch. But South Carolina's defense showed a pulse against the Vandy offense that doesn't have a pulse. Clayton White probably going to be fired at season's end, but that group was much better. Give him credit for that. All you need to know about South Carolina's defensive day: Alex Huntley, defensive tackle. He had as many points as Vandy's offense. Nice little rollout. Love it when a big fella gets a TD. We always love the JJ Pegues offensive touches. We love it when a guy like that gets involved. Good for Rattler to be able to come in and just dominate and have a laugher, a comfortable victory. Not so good that Vandy is not going to get an SEC win this year. I'm not banking on them being able to go into Knoxville and win against Tennessee, so I'm just going to say that right now. The question is about South Carolina. Can they beat Kentucky? Absolutely. Kentucky on the road, not much of a thing. South Carolina might actually be able to have some offensive balance. I think that is very much on the table. Unbelievable run by Mario Anderson to break like 3 different tackles in this one. He's become a really nice player for him. Kentucky, look, I could see Kentucky getting walloped in that game. I'm not saying that's what I'm predicting, but I could definitely see that happening and having a very similar feel to what we saw play out, just because Kentucky does so many self-inflicting things. Not sure if Maxwell Harrison's going to be at 100%. So if he's not, you're like, oh boy, Legette could run all over that defense. Let's leave the door just cracked open for potential Juice Wells return. Let's leave it cracked. Just like, I don't know how much, but at least a few inches. You just never know. A situation like that. The door is also cracked on South Carolina's bowl chances. Do you have anything you want to add to that, or can we just go to Yar now?
Oh, just real quick, we are creating just an electric. As much as I love Stoops, I hope South Carolina just kind of gets it together, plays really well. You know, I feel like playing Vandy is like when you're playing Mario Kart and you get like one of those power boosts. Like whichever point you get to see them this season is like a great week. Like you kind of could turn momentum around. So if they can ride that into Kentucky, beat them, man, that Clemson game for bowl eligibility is what I'm already rooting for.
Oh, that would be fantastic. That would be a very interesting way for Shane Beamer to close the season after starting off 2-6. Okay, Yar now. SEC Coach of the Year belongs to the winner of the SEC Championship. Yar now. I think Drink is the only non-SEC Championship coach who is even in the running.
I weirdly, I kind of feel like you have to give it to Drink. As much as impressive as what Kirby's done is and what Saban's does, I think you've kind of already given them their flowers. Whereas like that award feels like it's a little bit more of a new blood award. So I actually personally think I'm going to Drink just because of how bad they've been. Like it's cute, they got way better. Whereas Bama just kind of stayed where they're at. Georgia just kind of stayed where they're at. You know,
the award's actually not been a new blood thing. The last 4 coaches who have won SEC Coach of the Year have won a national championship. So take that for what it is, because it's
no, it's actually fair. Yeah.
Yeah, like Saban and Kirby and Ed Odron won in 2019 too, so it could end up just going to the winner of that. I think Saban and Kirby both have a very good argument. Drink, of course, as well will be part of that conversation. The last, 2018 Stoops was the last non-SEC championship, national championship winner, I should say, to be able to, or I should just say, yeah, it was all national championship winners, I believe. So Drink could have an argument similar to that, but I think it's kind of down to those 3 at this point. Okay, Yar now. Michigan will win a national title with or without Jim Harbaugh.
Still no. I didn't think that team could win with anybody's sides.
Is Jim Harbaugh dead? Is he dead? Because that post game was, man.
The Big Ten has spent 50 years trying to convince us that we're unserious and they're these learned people. And in one offseason, they've had Pat Fitzgerald, Mel Tucker, and now it seems like the WWE is just broken loose in the Big Ten. You go to that interview, and it literally looks like prime, like SmackDown. What is going on in the Big Ten, bro?
I think I have set alerts. Do I have alerts? Yeah, something like that for Desmond Howard when he speaks on Connor Stallions and anything Michigan suspension related. I just think he's got a really unbiased opinion, and I value his viewpoint. So.
Yep.
Keep me up to date on those. If there's something that passes by, just send me a text if you see anything like that. Yar na, we will make the best of Cake Week. Cake Week, not Cupcake Week. We rebranded it.
Mm-hmm.
That's yeah, we will.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I think that like as I got a little bit greedy talking about presenting in the future, but like, yeah, I think there's gonna be a lot of stuff on the line, a lot of teams that are really like fighting at the end of the year. So and like the vibes, I think there's lots of vibes at stake right now. I mean, Arkansas and Vandy feel like they're the only ones that are truly vibes down like for the rest of the year.
We have 3 games involving SEC versus SEC competition. So not great. Yep. Not great. At least we have Georgia, Tennessee. That's good. Georgia, Tennessee's good. Kentucky, South Carolina. That's going to be good. That's going to be fun. Look forward to that. But yeah, it will be a thin week. Potentially 2 interviews. We might be doing because obviously the slate is very, very light. We don't need to be digging into the cake week opponents that are significant underdogs as much. So yeah, okay. I know we ran long on a recap pod, but obviously the Fisher stuff was something that we were going to make sure that we went into pretty significant depth on. So apologies for the length of this episode. If you have not, leave us a 5-star review, subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast, which is presented by Texas Pete. Follow us on the app formerly known as Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Sat Down South, at CJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.